Welcome to Galactic Initiative's first show. I'm your host, Jeff. David, Sean, and I recorded the following review, part 1 of 2, for The Rise of Skywalker 2 weeks after the film's premiere on December 19th, 2020. Recently, I decided to release a proper video with images for the audio track, which is admittedly substandard. Think of it as a not-so-special edition. If you can forgive the telephone quality, I think you'll find substance in the discussion. If not substance, historical context. It is a 3-year-old snapshot of fans coping with the sequel trilogy. Many perspectives have changed over time. David was the apologist, Sean was overly diplomatic. Knowledge of the IP's current status will bring a few laughs and sighs in retrospect. I hope you enjoy this improved version. Welcome, David.
Hello.
Welcome, Sean.
Hello, my friend.
We'll begin at the beginning, the opening crawl. I'll read it, get your thoughts. The dead speak. The galaxy has heard a mysterious broadcast, a threat of revenge in the sinister voice of the late Emperor Palpatine. General Leia Organa dispatches secret agents to gather intelligence while Rey, the last hope of the Jedi, trains for battle against the diabolical First Order. Meanwhile, Supreme Leader Kylo Ren rages in search of the Phantom Emperor, determined to destroy any threat to his power.
For me, I go in for this movie. I didn't see any trailers. I didn't read any spoilers. So I had pretty much no preconceived notions regarding what was going to be happening, except for the fact that at Celebration they did announce that Palpatine was returning. So for me, it was a pretty quick and dirty synopsis of what was going on and what we were kind of heading towards. So I didn't have too much of a problem with it, but I know that it did leave a little bit to be desired.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think that the the crawl, as a summation of what's supposed to have been going on between the two films, and the two films, from what I read, are supposed to be happening several years apart. It really didn't give you an idea of what had been going on. For the most part, it gave you what was going on 5 minutes before the movie started, because we go straight from the crawl to Kylo raging across the galaxy. The Palpatine thing, of course, like David said, was spoiled, and I use air quotes on that early on at Celebration, so it was not a big reveal. I suppose they could get away with putting it in the crawl then at that point, because pretty much everybody who cared knew at that point going into it, having seen a trailer and or the original, teaser reel from Celebration. But I thought that the dead speak was an interesting choice of words, especially since, Carrie Fisher had passed on, and ultimately later on in retrospect, after hearing the voices of all of the past Jedi, as well as another visit from Han Solo, I think that they probably could have used a better choice of words.
Knowing that Palpatine was going to be a part of the film, did you expect him in the crawl?
I don't know. I mean, you could have announced him the way they announced him, with just, the laugh and the menacing, presence in the background. And you could have kept his reveal till later on in the film. The fans would be waiting for him to show up, but you could have done it in a more meaningful or impactful or even exciting way. But it didn't hurt his. What hurt his character in the film was the writing, not the reveal in the crawl.
So yeah, I would agree. I think if anything, they could have done a little bit better job of talking about how he survived. I mean, it's just all of a sudden I think he mentions that he's died before, but that's it. Nothing, no deep dive, no nothing. Especially with the fact that he's hanging there by some contraption and has obviously cataracts in his eyes. So we don't really know how he survived or got to this point. Obviously, he's been hiding out. Like I've mentioned to a couple people, I mean, the movie starts off pretty fast and furious, and it would have been nice at some point for it to take at least a couple big breaths and explain some of the stuff in more detail.
Reading about a broadcast isn't the same as experiencing it. It's an odd choice to tell us about a broadcast that we'll never see or hear. And from the opening crawl, we jump into
a montage, which I think is unique in the history of Star Wars films. How did you feel about the montage taking us from a wayfinder on Mustafar to Exegol and seeing Supreme Leader Snoke in a container?
That was a little jarring. We probably should have had something start with maybe even Rey's training with Leia and kind of starting off there, and then we get the broadcast, and then that sets up the reveal of Palpatine, the urgency of the mission. Or we could have started with Kylo raging, gone to the slower moment like David was talking about with Leia and Rey, and then go back to Kylo meeting or confronting the Emperor. But it all becomes it's very breakneck speed, and then you're thrown into the situation and you see all these things and nothing is really explained thoroughly. And I think that's going to be a refrain that you're going to hear a lot as we discuss this film, is that there's a lot of surface, there's not a lot of depth, there's a lot of questions and important things like, I don't know why the Death Star 2, which was completely obliterated in Return of the Jedi, is now suddenly in very large chunks on a planet. How Palpatine survived after exploding in the shaft after Vader threw him down it. Things like that would have helped us suspend our disbelief in that moment.
So regarding the broadcast of the Emperor, it actually, I don't know if anybody is a Fortnite fan, but I happened to catch the fact that they did broadcast his message over Fortnite either the day before the release or the day of. So it is out there. I just did a quick Google search. It is out there for people to listen to. But again, it would have been cool to add that into somehow the storyline.
Well, you see that David brings up an interesting point, and this is something that I've mentioned on other podcasts in regards to modern era Disney Star Wars, is that we are getting feature-length films that either leave us with questions or have large gaps that the fan base is expected to go out and either seek out things like the Fortnite, or buy comic books, or buy novels, or
Battlefront
watch
2?
cartoons or video games, or all that kind of stuff. We're expected to go out and consume all this other media and spend all this extra money in order for us to get a complete story. And I find that to be problematic and a little bit insulting.
I'm still having trouble figuring out what's canon and what's not anymore.
True.
Well, yeah, that is also true. I mean, we were told at the beginning that with the purge of the expanded universe, that there was going to be only one story group and one canon, and then they promptly went and said, well, it's mostly and it's kind of, and then we got the Lego cartoons and they're like, oh, well, those are not really canon, but even though we were told everything coming out was now canon.
It's a shame we don't have any source material.
So thank you, Kathy. Excellent. Well played, sir.
Are we to understand that Palpatine on the second Death Star was a clone, or that Palpatine survived the fall?
That's a good question. Nothing. So there are many fan theories. There's many people out there on Twitter and other social media platforms that are saying that he was a clone. They're saying that he survived. But if you just look at the film and you listen to the dialogue, like you say, he references having died before, but we don't even know if that's in reference to Death Star 2 or not. And we don't know if he's a clone. I mean, clearly he has cloning capability. He had a jug of Snokes there next to his throne, so... You're welcome. That's a little inside joke for the listeners there.
I found that container, it disturbed me, and I'm wondering in the context of the previous two films, if we would have gotten a jug of Snoke. So, what say you?
Well, for me, one of the things I've kind of taken away from everything is that JJ obviously wasn't a big fan of The Last Jedi, and I strongly feel that he basically had to make two films in one and crunch it all together in order to get his overall vision of what he wanted to originally do, his treatment that he gave to Kathleen Kennedy and Disney. JJ obviously wasn't too pleased. I mean, he retconned, as far as I'm concerned, quite a bit of the stuff with The Last Jedi, but did a pretty good job, having gone back and rewatched Force Awakens and The Last Jedi. He did a pretty good job of weaving those together as best he could with what he had. From what I've heard or read, there's a 3-hour version out there that he did. It'd be nice if at some point they would release that.
Well, what do you think is in the extra hour? That's the question.
Obviously, the Palpatine thing, I think, is in there, where he talks a little bit more. I wish they would have done a lot better job of the Chewbacca thing. I don't know. I just hopefully more character development. That would be my hope. And maybe, honestly, some Knights of Ren stuff.
Yeah, a little more Knights of Ren would have been good. As far as character development, I think that you're asking for a lot after 2 films of pretty much zero character development or static characters or character regression for some. The only character that I can see that actually grew and developed over the course of the 3 films was General Hux.
Don't get me started on Hux. That was the worst part of the movie. Let me be straightforward. I actually really liked Rise of Skywalker. I sent Jeff a list of 5 or 6 things immediately after I saw it that I had issue with, but for the most part, it's like a 8.5 for me. But that reveal of Hux made me ill.
Well, it's the only thing that makes sense in the entire trilogy, especially after the way that Kylo Ren had treated him in The Last Jedi.
Well, I get it. I think just how it was, I'm the mole, or I'm whatever.
The spy.
Said.
Oh.
Yeah, I'm the spy. The way he said it, or the way it came out.
Well, it's a million times better than a mom joke.
It's true.
Well, it's clear. Hux's demotion is clear, and now there's a Supreme Council to go with the Supreme Leader. But Allegiant General Pride appears from nowhere, and
yes.
This is not unusual in Star Wars films. This is a General Grievous move. David, are you upset about Hux's demotion, Hux's role in the film, the fact that he's marginalized, or just his death?
Oh, the death I was perfectly fine with. I expected that to happen. I think just his reveal of being the spy, how he said it and how they reacted, it just could have been done better. Okay, oh hey, he's the spy. All right, cool, let's go. Boom, 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 done. No, I didn't think he was marginalized. I think his character ended the way it should have, and it's just how that line came across.
General Pride, do we like that character? Do we feel that character needed any development or had a meaningful role in the film?
I would have liked to have seen him in actually The Last Jedi. I mean, honestly, I think he would have made a better Hux.
I mean, I want to say every character in the new trilogy is treated that way. I mean, one of my initial criticisms of The Force Awakens, and I really enjoyed The Force Awakens as a setup, as a return. As I became more familiar with it and watched it more, I realized exactly how close of a ripoff it was of A New Hope. But at the same time, I understand what was trying to be done there. But I felt like we had too many new characters, especially with the creation of the First Order and all of this ensemble cast that we were trying to build in a very short time. And then, of course, trying to deal with the legacy characters, which they didn't very well. But then we went into The Last Jedi, and instead of saying, okay, well, we've come up with, Poe and Finn and Rey and, a few other characters, and we will continue to develop them, we got another stack of characters on top of that. And we got Haldo, and we got, Rose, and, some others. And then, then in this movie, we get more people, and we've never been really even given a chance to get to know the three main characters that we were handed in, The Force Awakens of, Finn and Rey and Poe. And so all the ancillary bad guys and everybody else, like, it all feels like everybody's been underserved in a lot of ways in their character development. And so, I mean, I kind of half tongue-in-cheek say, that Hux is the only one that has a real story arc, but he really kind of does. He starts off as a respected peer to Kylo Ren under Leader Snoke, and then he gets demoted and seeks revenge, and a perfectly natural character arc for an individual, right? You went from being a leader and being a peer to being generally abused to being demoted and generally abused. It's like, well, of course you're going to... His statement makes perfect sense. I don't care who wins, I just want Kylo to lose.
So was he redeemed at the end then, Sean?
Well, I don't say he was redeemed. I think he got what he deserved, unlike Kylo Ren. But I think that, I understand his motivations. It doesn't mean I like him or he's my boy or I'm going to invite him over to my house for, a barbecue. But I understand his motivations as a character. He has a beginning and an end arc. And you can't say that of, Finn and Poe. Like, well, I don't even know who these guys are anymore.
Hux began with such promise in The Force Awakens, but with every successive scene, he just continued to fade from the trilogy. Perhaps he should have been a one-movie character. Obviously, I'm not here to rewrite the sequel trilogy, but it was strange to come into this movie and have very little Hux, and then the Hux we had, he's gone and that's it. The dynamic with General Pryde, Pryde feels like a callback to Tarkin. He's sinister. We can take him seriously, and at times you can't take the First Order seriously. Yeah, Pryde, in my opinion, is a far superior character, and I wish we had more of him.
Yeah, I would have loved to have seen him early on. I think he would have been much better than Hux. And I don't know, I mean, again, I can't blame the actor. Like, between Kylo Ren having tantrums and this really young general who's kind of also playing his power games and jockeying and is also kind of skittish and weak. The whole First Order thing just it didn't feel like the Empire. Like you say, it didn't have the sinister or real dread surrounding it. When the Empire shows up, you feel dread in the first trilogy. When the First Order shows up, you're kind of like, oh, these are the guys that are pretending to be the Empire.
Although Hux's speech, though, in Force Awakens, that was pretty good. I enjoyed that.
Oh, when he was crying? With his red eyes, his watery eyes out there, and he's like,
I thought that was well done.
The loathsome Republic.
I enjoyed the spirit of it.
There's been a lot of, over the years, there's been a lot of writing about, and of course it's been acknowledged by Lucas and others that, the Empire is supposed to be a stand-in for Nazi Germany in a way, for fascist regimes with the aesthetic and all those things. And JJ took it to a whole nother level with the red banners and all that kind of stuff, and the Nuremberg-style rally there on Starkiller Base. But even with the imagery in the sequel trilogy, even with, like you say, the well-written speech, it felt a little ham-handed to me.
Oh, I mean, I would agree with Sean. I mean, the actors are told what to do, so they got to do what they do. I was thinking about this the other day. It's actually nice to have some acting taking place during Star Wars as well. Thinking back to the prequels, I am not a fan of the prequels, mainly because of the lack of acting that took place. So,
Ahmed Best should have had an Oscar. I'm sorry.
I know Jar Jar's your bud. The acting 1,000 times better in the sequel than the prequels. And I think.
Yeah, I'm not gonna argue about the acting in the prequels. I'm not upset with the acting per se. from the actors. I'm upset with the acting as delivered by the writers and the directors.
And speaking of great acting, Carrie Fisher and her role as Princess
The dead
Leia
speak!
and Princess Leia in the film. So.
The dead speak!
Great way of putting it, Sean.
Some footage laying around the cutting room floor, and some CGI was slapped over the top of that, and then it was inserted into a film, and it feels like we almost even built a serious plot point around 5 words, you know? Never underestimate a droid. Never underestimate a droid. And then Rey. So, like, that's it. I guess kind of like her big things. You know, don't show me, tell me, or don't tell me, show me. What I like, it's all these platitudes and weird things. It's outtake footage, and we're trying to stitch it together and make this person feel like a meaningful leader of what remains of the rebellion. It fell so flat, and it felt disjointed, and it really took me out of the movie. Of all the things that went on in that movie that were strange and awkward and out of place, the Princess Leia scenes really took me out of the film and kind of made me go, this is uncomfortable.
Yeah, I honestly, after reading a couple things about the scenes that they did and some of the rationale of cutting people's roles down, I would definitely agree with Sean. You know, the whole goal of this sequel was to interlay and give Carrie Fisher her big opportunity. Unfortunately, stuff happens. And they should have just moved forward instead of doing what they did. Because, I mean, one of the things I read was, I know people were complaining about Rose Tico, Miss Tran, not having a lot of screen time. And apparently the comment was made to her that we can't integrate you into any of the scenes with Carrie. So that's why your scenes were cut, or we didn't have anything really for you to do. That type of decision making actually kind of makes me upset, and it's just like, you know what, we got to just move forward.
Yeah, I would have preferred that the crawl, instead of starting with the dead speaks, it would say General Leia has died or General Leia is dead, and then give me the first paragraph about how she was a great hero of the Republic and that she went out fighting and that her sacrifice, you know, has gained purchase in the galaxy for the new resistance, and that new worlds are flocking to their banner. And I would have been like, that is great. You know, that's appropriate. Yeah, make it appropriate. Yeah, give it a purpose, make it pay off. And as we all know, when you try to please everyone, you please no one.
A lot of criticism leveled at The Last Jedi involved Rian Johnson's treatment of Luke Skywalker, just not seeing a portrayal of Luke that was expected or fair or logical. Have you heard, based on Fisher's role in The Rise of Skywalker, have you heard the same criticism leveled at this film, that it wasn't a fair send-off, that it wasn't right, that she didn't have her due as a character?
I think everybody is just, for the most part, pretty excited that they were able to integrate her into the movie. I mean, everybody that I've talked to was like, oh, it was so great to see her on screen. I know her daughter is struggling, though, with watching the movie. She didn't even go to the premiere, and her rationale was, you know, my mom passed away. I mean, I can't imagine having to maybe go and see that movie and have to basically relive your mom dying. So, she might be her and her family might be the only ones that aren't excited. I wish they would have just been done.
Yeah, I would concur with that. I think that a majority of the people that are out there right now in the socials are complaining about a lot of things, but I haven't really heard anything about Carrie Fisher. And again, something that I had said on another podcast a long time ago was, you know, I don't understand. There's this weird cult of personality or reverence that goes to Carrie Fisher as being Princess Leia, and I don't really necessarily understand it. I get it. I get people have their favorite characters, and I'm totally fine with that. And then being passionate about your people. I mean, you know, me and Darth Maul, right? And Nine Nub, yeah, which we'll get to. Yeah, we'll get to that, my friend. But my thing is like it almost, because she died prematurely by some people's standards, or at least in the middle of this wrap up saga. I think that there's been a lot of trepidation surrounding any kind of criticism of her or her acting or her role in the films. And if anybody's going to take any heat or any business about this, it's going to be JJ, because he was the one who has ultimately made the decision to handle her legacy the way that he handled it. And whatever we got on screen with her was his decision, and then, by proxy was signed off on by Disney, Lucasfilm, and Kathleen Kennedy. So,
You really think it was his decision, though, to keep her?
oh, I think so, absolutely. Not to go tin hat and conspiracy theory on anybody, but the point is that JJ wanted to get the story back to where he wanted the story to be, what he had set up in the Force Awakens and what he had initially outlined for what ultimately became The Last Jedi. And so he had an agenda there. But I also think that because of the divisions in the Star Wars fandom, because of the two camps of people, and when it comes to modern Star Wars, he really felt like he could pull off sort of this healing move by retconning a lot of The Last Jedi and by incorporating Carrie Fisher in such a way that tries to make her death a meaningful part of the story, which ultimately you can argue whether it does or not, but I understand what he tried to do with it, with the reaching out to Kylo and having that killer. But I think he ultimately had to do it. I mean, there was talk like, oh, we're going to leave it up to to her family to decide whether or not it's okay, and then like there was different things coming from her daughter and her brother, and ultimately then it all went silent, and then suddenly one day JJ's like, yep, she's going to be in it, and you're like, okay, But I don't think he was pressured to put her in by Kathleen Kennedy or anybody, but I don't think that they put up any resistance or said, maybe we should rethink this, or maybe after the first viewing they looked at those scenes and they're like, man, maybe we should just trash the whole thing and start over. I don't know. There's a lot of people who are at fault here for all of this, least of which is Carrie Fisher, because she's not around to do anything about it.
True. Early on in production, I came across an announcement saying there would be no CGI, and yet there was CGI.
I think what they meant in that was they weren't going to create her from whole cloth like they did in Rogue One. There was CGI about her outfits and her hair and who she was interacting with and all that stuff, but I don't think there was any 100% digital mock-up Princess Leia's.
Are you talking about the training, the Jedi training?
Yes, yeah. I'm thinking specifically of that scene, the flashback, Leia on her last day of training.
Right, okay. Yeah. The judges will accept that. Yeah.
See, and that's another scene that I would have loved to have seen more of, or more some dialogue or something more.
Two thoughts. I mean, seeing Carrie Fisher in the movie took me out of the movie. It forced me to contemplate all that had happened in the real world, and it wasn't great for me. It was a bit of a distraction, and I also felt bad. I felt, whether it was like sympathy or empathy, there was this emotion building in me every time she spoke, just thinking what they're doing with the dialogue is a real stretch. And then, the other thought from that CGI training scene, I've heard a lot of criticism of how her face and her likeness was handled, and a lot of praise for Luke. I thought both looked great.
Oh, I love that scene. Like I said, I wanted more of that.
Yeah, I think we would have benefited from a bit more of the backstory. Having that scene doesn't ease the pain of Leia flying through space in The Last Jedi, but at least we have some Force training and some justification. We have the explanation that we lacked in the previous film.
Oh, so you two okay with digitally recreating people? Because honestly, I had no problem with Tarkin. I know in Rogue One, the end scene with Leia was a little off, but not bad. I would have been perfectly fine if they would have digitally recreated her, but I understand why they did.
It's my concern would be the intent. So, like the Tarkin scene, that was perfectly appropriate. But the digitally recreating people, there's some ethics there. There's definitely some ethics there that you need to look into, consulting with surviving family and things of that nature. But I mean, if it's done in a respectful way, I don't have a problem with it. Like the young Princess Leia at the end of Rogue One, while executed not necessarily as well as Tarkin in Rogue One, was fine. The young Luke and Leia in the training scene was done well, and I think that when you do things like that and it's a brief moment, like when you young up people, like for example in the Tron Legacy, you have young Jeff Bridges or whatever at the beginning. If you can do it in such a way that it's brief or that it looks real enough that you avoid the uncanny valley, it's not a big deal. But it's like when you had the movie Beowulf, where everybody in the film is digitally created or recreated, and you have 2.5 hours of that, and it becomes just really jarring and scary, and not in a good way that serves the plot, but just really jarring and scary. Then yeah, I'd say let's just avoid that at all costs, please.
Yeah, no issues with it. There's the ethics of dealing with the actor and the actor's family. There's the quality of the CGI, but if the technology is up to it, I have no issues at all. I hope at some future time there's actually some touch-up work done on Leia at the end of Rogue One.
I think she looked plastic.
It didn't take me out of the film the way seeing Leia in this film did, but that's definitely a scene they should revisit.
I loved seeing Harrison Ford. I was not expecting that. Like I said, I didn't read or watch anything. I even steered clear of all the trailers and the TV spots. So I was going in cold turkey. And the fact that they brought Harrison back, I loved the scene. I loved all the callbacks that they gave to Force Awakens. I thought it was a very touching scene. Gave Kylo some closure. I loved it.
I get what they were trying to do. So what they were trying to achieve was Kylo Ren was having some kind of crisis of conscience that was manifesting itself in a semi-physical form.
He's had a crisis since he did it. Well, at least that's what I got from it.
Right. I understand that. If he's been dealing with this the whole time, how come we haven't seen the ghost of Han show up and be like, "Hey, kid," but
because he's not a Jedi. He's not force sensitive like other people.
So then, why is he in the film, David? Right. So, but my thing with this whole deal is, if you are going to have this happen, like, there's better ways in cinema to deal with this issue. There's no indication that it's an illusion or an indication that it's some kind of manifestation of the subconscious of Kylo, or it's an actual ghost of Han Solo, or it's some kind of weird bridging of Force ghost and whatever. Like, we don't know.
So would you like to have seen some blurring?
If he had the blue shimmer, I would have been angry because he's not a Jedi.
No. Okay. But blurring around the other area.
Well, maybe blurring or maybe make him semi-transparent. Like, let's see just a little bit of the background through it. But like I said, even if you can do it in cinema in such a way that when someone is dealing with a hallucination or dealing with an apparition of the dead, it's been done in so many other films in ways that are believable. This one just
lazy.
Yes, and this also feels like, again, more fan service and more like, hey, remember all you people that were mad at me for killing him off in the first movie? Well, he's back. It's almost like at the end of Animal House, where you get to see all the characters and they pause on him and they're like, oh, he grew up to be this, and oh, he went on and did that. And it's like, it just felt a little too in your face. The Han Solo thing for me just didn't work. Like, I understand what they were trying to do. I get it. They're trying to They were trying to reinforce in the audience the turn of Kylo, between his mother reaching out, between being bested by Rey and being visited by the conscience of his father or whatnot. Like, we finally see him get the resolve to be good and do the right thing, but God,
it was the death of one and the resurrection of the other.
I believe the scene was meant for Leia, but without Carrie Fisher,
exactly.
Harrison Ford is the next best thing. It's one of the few scenes that drew an emotional reaction from me while I was watching the film. And when I walked out of the theater the first time, that scene really stuck with me. It just feels so out of place.
It's a multi-billion-dollar student film project, and it feels like you go into your senior thesis class at USC Film School. The professor says, "I want every single one of you to make a 10-minute short film, and it's got to include these 5 elements." And then the professor takes all those student films and then edits them into a larger story. And it kind of works because he gave you the keys, he gave you the core elements that you had to have in your film, so you can stitch it together through editing, but it still feels kind of Frankenstein-y. And I think, for me, this movie felt that way. Like you say, there's moments, and there's scenes, and there's things, but when you stitch them all together and try and tell a story, it just doesn't work. Like the Knights of Ren. Like that was, I want to talk about an underserved concept that was completely ignored in The Last Jedi, and that we finally got finally got to see them. And that whole scene when they're walking through the Star Destroyer and they're tracking mud everywhere, I thought was fantastic. Like I thought that was great. It's like you have this analog and a digital world. You have dirt in this, clinically clean Imperial environment, and you have all of that. It just worked for me, but it was a vignette. It was a scene that worked, but in a larger scheme of things, what did it do? Did it serve the plot? No. Did it advance anything? No. Did it answer any of our questions? No. Did we even get real justice for the Knights of Ren? No. They walked around, they looked menacing, they tracked dirt in my house, and then they all got butchered at the end of the film. And it was frustrating.
Oh, no.
I've been waiting for Knights of Ren for like 5 years.
Don't forget the nice little montage of them standing on their plateau in the desert.
What was that all about? That was nothing.
Made no sense.
It would have made a fantastic YouTube video.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, or a deleted scene from one of the Lord of the Rings movies, because it kind of looked like the Uruk-hai searching for the ring. But other than that,
yes,
yeah,
that was again one of my big complaints. I mean, they walked them around like they're all tough guys. Kijimi, they were there just walking around. They didn't do nothing, and then all of a sudden, Ben Solo comes with his lightsaber, puts his hands up like, all right, here we go. You get stabbed, you get stabbed, you get stabbed, we're done. Moving on.
Why do the Knights of Ren betray Kylo? We have a really large gap between seeing them on Kijimi and their appearance on Exegol, and at that point, they've sided with Palpatine. Does that make sense?
Well, on its face, it doesn't. What should have happened is there should have been a scene somewhere in there where Palpatine specifically and overtly calls out him sensing in the Force that Kylo Ren has turned to the light. And at that point, then you will understand why all the minions of the dark side are now trying to kill him. But it doesn't really, because it happens on Endor, and then he shows up on Exegol, right? Like, there's no connective tissue there. We, as Star Wars fans and people who will have a more deeper relationship with the material and understand the Force, at least we used to understand how the Force worked until these movies came out.
Just for moving rocks. That's all it is. Moving rocks.
That's all it is. It's moving rocks. Yeah. Yeah. But there should have been some kind of connection. There should have been the sensing of Palpatine. And you should mark this on your calendar, David. I'm going to say something nice about The Last Jedi. When Leader Snoke was in his throne room, or whatever you wanted to call it, and right before he was unceremoniously killed by Kylo, I thought it was cool how Kylo is tricking him, because he's in Kylo's head and he knows everything that Kylo's doing and he knows what Kylo is thinking. And when he goes through that recitation of he's turning the saber, he's turning it on, he's going to strike his enemy or whatever, Snoke thinks he's doing it to Rey when he's actually doing it to him. That makes sense. That was really kind of interesting and neat, and how even though we see these intense connections, it was spoken to again in the prequels and things like that, where yeah, you may see a vision, you may have a vision, but the vision might not necessarily be true. And even Palpatine says, oh, I've foreseen it, he's going to destroy all of us or whatever, but it doesn't quite happen the way it's supposed to. We could have had some exposition like that about, okay, I made a deal with Kylo Ren, he's backing out on that deal now, I can sense it, I can feel it, because he senses Leia doing something, but it doesn't get fully called out. Like in that moment where he talks about, oh, she's interfered with her son or whatever. It hints at it, but it doesn't fully call out, like, okay, we've lost control of Kylo Ren. We need to go with plan B, whether it be the kind of Imperial Guard looking red guys or the Knights of Ren. If you see Kylo, stop him at all costs. And, it takes maybe 30 seconds in the movie, and compared to like some of the things that we got that we could have, edited out, like our U2-esque flyover of the Knights of Ren, you pull a few of those things out of the film and you can put it back in meaningful dialogue and exposition by the main characters that serves the plot and also helps us have a greater understanding of what's going on.
Well, I want to give them names. They are Vikral, Cardo, Ushar, Trudgeon, Kurik, and Aplek.
Don't forget Steve. Steve is important.
It's like a boy band.
Yeah.
And they
boy bands in Mordor.
they certainly did a number on poor Bulio, whose head is thrown onto the Supreme Council table. But did JJ have bigger plans for them, and there just wasn't time?
Yes and yes.
It's like the extra 30 minutes that I was looking for right there.
Oh, yeah, give me an hour of the Knights of Ren and Babu Freak, and I'm on it, dude. I'm all over that movie.
Babu!
Hey!
Is it my imagination, or was there a bit of an Italian accent?
It's kind of like drunk Italian uncle at the party. He's like, hey, I got the droids, black, and then he falls over. You're like, oh yeah, that's my guy. He's the new Jar Jar. He's actually better than Jar Jar. He's all the Jar Jar and 1/5 the size. Yeah.
And 1/100th of the screen time.
Yeah, but so much better. Such high impact. Oscar worthy again.
Babu Frick is a war hero. He flew in the Battle of Exegol.
Yeah, that's true.
John Boyega seems genuinely upset.
About everything?
Well, about his role in the film, certainly.
Well, he certainly had enough time in The Last Jedi. I don't know what he's complaining about.
Yeah, I don't think so. He had a lot of time in that movie, but all it was people lecturing him on how dumb he was. So, in the first film, his character is, he's intriguing as a character, right? He starts off, he's a minion of the dark side and the First Order, and he has a crisis of conscience. He refuses to commit a war crime, and then his story arc goes to must escape, the First Order at all costs, and if it means, freeing their prized prisoner in Poe Dameron, we'll do it. And that's great. And then he kind of plateaus because he meets Rey, and then he becomes kind of smitten, and that's the rest of his movie. He follows her around. In the next movie, his motivations are similar, right? His whole plan is to try and find Rey. He needs to go save her or whatever is in his mind. So he wakes up from his coma and he goes after that. But then his adventure, quote unquote, to go find Rey was basically him being dragged around by Rose Tico and being lectured on, 21st century economics, 21st century economics, and then he gets lectured by DJ about how naive and stupid he is because everybody's a war profiteer and 21st century economics. And then ultimately, when his character looks like it's finally going to have some kind of heroic arc where he sacrifices himself to save the remnants of the resistance, Rose Tico shows up and lectures him about love and thwarts his plans to be a hero.
That would have been a great ending for him, by the way.
Well, it would have been a great ending. It would have been a great ending for Poe or Finn or anyone who was left in the Resistance.
Yep.
Right, but then we get the cop out with Rey being the Rey, and the character of Finn again in this film in The Rise of Skywalker, he becomes window dressing in a lot of ways. He's there. He has some decent banter. We kind of see him and Poe have developed this friendship or whatnot because they've been in combat together. But his overall purpose in it becomes confusing, and really, you could edit him out of the film and it wouldn't change anything. Now, I guess maybe the same thing goes for Poe. Like it's just weird. It's unfortunate that, and again, to give JJ the benefit of the doubt, which is asking a lot because he killed my second favorite character in Star Wars in this movie.
Death follows you, Sean. Death follows you.
Death
follows you.
It does. We killed Nine Nub. We killed, Admiral Akbar in the last film. They chopped Darth Maul in half at the end of Phantom Menace. I mean, what's left for me in this world? Honestly, what's left for me? Nothing. All these characters, we had to do something with all these characters, and we had to wrap up all their stories. And I don't think we did that, first of all, but we also, like I say, JJ is trying to do what he was supposed to be doing in the previous film with these characters, and then do what he was supposed to be doing in this film with these characters. And it feels like these movies, especially, we know they did it. We know George Lucas did this in his trilogy, but it didn't feel so ham-handed and self-serving. But we keep packing these characters on top of these characters, and nobody gets a reasonable intro, like General Pride. Nobody gets a reasonable conclusion. At the end of The Rise of Skywalker, we're sitting there and we have to do this thing where we have this big long shot of all these people. So you're like, okay, remember them? They made it. Okay, remember this person? They made it. Okay, it's just, it felt confused and way too busy. That's probably the best way to say it. The Rise of Skywalker is really busy.
Well, I made the comment to somebody that it felt like somebody took 5 Red Bulls, drank them, and then was like, here we go.
Yeah, or they filmed the whole thing and are like, that feels like a comfortable pace. And you're like, well, maybe for you because your heart rate is exploding. But yeah.
Watching and listening to Oscar Isaac and John Boyega and many of the other cast members, there's definitely a feeling of relief that this movie and this trilogy is over. How is this how is this going to influence their careers going forward? And when they look back on this, how do you think they're going to feel about it in, say 10 to 15, 20 years?
So for me, a couple things popped to mind. First of all, 6 years on any project is a long time, and it's not just the filming, it's the excessive press that you have to do, especially with a movie like this. Oscar Isaac should be thanking his lucky stars, though, because if I remember right, he was actually supposed to die in The Force Awakens, but then when Harrison Ford broke his leg, JJ realized what a great actor he was and basically put him back in the movie. So he was supposed to be dead, but I'd be pretty exhausted as well. I think Boyega is going to be the Mark Hamill of the group, because Oscar Isaac has a wide variety of different things that he's already done and is currently doing. Daisy Ridley, she'll be fine since she started doing this.
The thing, though, that you say is that, being on a film project for 6 years or however many years is tiring and will wear you out. I would agree with that. However, I don't think that this 6-year film project wound up the way other large, or long-term film projects wound up. On other projects, and even other projects in the Star Wars universe, we have casts and crew who come away from these long trials together as, just excited and happy and, for the product, and sad to see it all come to an end. And we're not getting that with this group.
I would have taken a Lord of the Rings 3 hour and 30 minute, last movie. But again, I think if you do it going in knowing that you're going to make 3 movies out of one big story arc, I think that's what you have to do from here on out with these trilogies. Not just try to piecemeal them and give them to this director and this director and this director. I think that there's one thing that we've learned is they have no problem with firing directors if they don't like what they see, but if they sign somebody up to do all 3, you're kind of stuck with them. I would assume.
Well, you can mitigate that by writing the story first.
Correct.
When you allow the writer to be the director, or the director to be the writer, as the case may be, and then you hire 3 different writer-directors, or 2, one guy doing the bookends, you're bound to have problems.
So do you think the 3 years between now and the next supposed movie, do you think that's enough time?
No, I do not. At all. If you're talking about trying to do another serious trilogy of films, and it doesn't have to be tied into the previous 9. It could be a trilogy, say, about the Old Republic. It could be a trilogy about, the Hutts. It could be anything, right? The point is, if you're going to write and genuinely dedicate yourself to the craft of writing a really good saga of films, they're going to need a couple of years just to do that. And then these movies, to be appropriately filmed and then post-production to where the CGI is good, the special effects are appropriate, and it looks right, you're going to need another 2 years. So I think that if they really want to be serious about creating good entertainment, and whatever it's about, doesn't matter, they're going to have to spend a couple of solid years writing and editing before they ever cast anyone, before they even start pre-production art or any of that stuff. It's got to be a solid story, and you can't use the crutch of, we'll put a space battle in there, or we'll get Neil Scanlon to go create a brown slug or whatever that was in Rise of Skywalker. It was in
Claude.
it for like 3. Yeah,
Claude is actually his name.
Is it like KLOD?
Yes.
Of course it is.
KLAUD.
Oh, okay, Cloud.
It might be Cloud.
It's German. Anyway.
The guy that didn't fix the short. That's who you're talking about, right?
Yeah, the brown slug. Yeah. Yeah, or whatever he was. I think he had antenna. He was only in it very briefly, but to be honest, that was another jarring moment in this movie. I was kind of like, what is that thing and why is it there and then it's gone?
Let's revisit the original trilogy and Lucas writing the 3 movies. Where does that unifying force come from? Where does that vision come from? Does it come from the head of Lucasfilm? Does it come from the writers? Does it come from the directors, or all the above?
I think it's got to come from, in this case, Kathleen Kennedy. That's where she's kind of in charge. That's the way I see it. And for Lucasfilm.
For the modern trilogy, for sure. Like the sequel trilogy is, for better or for worse, the product of Kathleen Kennedy around Lucasfilm. I don't know how much of a hand she had in any of it, other than hiring and firing people. I don't know how much creative energy she actually put into it, but she ultimately signed all the checks, and she signed off on all the final products.
So that brings me to MacGuffins, and the film is full of them, and from what I know of J.J. Abrams and his filmmaking, this is pretty common for him. So whether we're dealing with the Wayfinders or the Dagger or the Sith Fleet or the Antenna, are those helpful to the plot, helpful to the pace? Are they unnecessary? Do you think he should have taken a different direction?
So I overall, I thought they were very helpful. I mean, the Wayfinder I thought was a pretty cool, ingenious thing to do. I know that it kind of reminds you of the artifacts that you'll see in the Clone Wars and things like that.
The holocrons.
The holocrons, yeah. The dagger I thought was okay. I know a lot of people call it the Goonie dagger.
It's garbage.
Again, didn't have too much of a problem with it because, again, the pace, I mean, he just kept on going and going and going. You know, hey, we have this happen, now we have the solution. This happened, now we have the solution. This happened, and so on. So, like I said, the pace was pretty quick. The Sith Fleet, okay, but the satellite part was totally dumb. Because, I mean, seriously, you've got ships flying down there. You know, just shoot the stupid thing. I mean, really, is it that hard? Do we really need a ground assault on something that you can shoot with a weapon? Hey, because nobody mentioned anything about shields. Just shoot the stupid thing and be done with it.
How else are you going to get the horses in there, David? Come on.
Oh, again, that was another one of my issues, the horses. And Jeff, you did not have that on your list. Talk about the horses.
I knew they would come up.
But again, you know what? You have to have things to move the story along. Those are his choices. The Wayfinders, I thought were kind of especially that allowed us to go through the cloud and see Kylo using his Jedi skills with his flying. And in actuality, it also gave us a look at a cloud cluster, which I don't think is very common in Star Wars. Sean, you could probably clear that up if I got that wrong. I know it's big in Star Trek, but not necessarily in Star Wars.
Well, if you watch Solo.
That is true. That is true. Yep, I agree.
All right, David, work with me on this.
Oh, no.
We're going to do a little thought experiment, okay? So
do I need to sign a waiver?
No. Well, you might want to. I don't know. It's not it's not a clinical trial. It's not a clinical trial, okay? So the Death Star 2.
I know it was totally blown up.
It's incomplete. No, there's nothing about this. It's incomplete. It's floating around the moon of this planet simply because it's a place to hide while they're building it, so then they can take it out into the universe and cause terror. Okay? The rebellion shows up and blows it up, and let's just say they don't blow it up as well as they blew it up in the movie, and they blew it up only as well as JJ wanted them to blow it up, so a piece could land in the ocean on the planet. Okay?
Yep, I'm with you.
So then Rey shows up with this Sith knife that has a compass built into it because it was made for math students, and just happens so perfectly, the spot that she's standing on that cliff, that there's no marker there. There's no stand here and hold the dagger. She just rolls up on the beach one day, whips it out, pulls the thing out and goes, it's right there, and the edge of the dagger magically matches the debris of the side of the Death Star.
Hey, Sean.
Tell her exactly where it is.
Sean.
Are you kidding me?
It's called the Force.
No, it's not called the Force. It's called bad writing.
That's how you use the Force.
And it's called a video game plot.
How you use the Force.
You talk about fast pace, and you talk about all this things lead to things lead to things. This is basically playing Call of Duty on easy. And then the other thing about it is you talk about the fast pace. The reason why we have a fast pace is because if they didn't have a fast pace, and the audience actually was given a moment to sit and digest what they were seeing, they would all call out the fact that none of it makes any sense, and it doesn't hold up to any logic. And I know it's a galaxy far, far away, and we're all supposed to, have our suspension of disbelief. But even within the rules established in this universe over 8 previous films, none of that makes any sense. Okay? So the dagger is garbage. I rest my case. Your Honor, Jeff, please rule.
It's the Force. It's how you use it. It's the Force, man. She was destined to be there.
All three of us agree that the pace is too rapid. We spend time with this antenna, and then the antenna becomes irrelevant because General Pride shuts down the antenna and
It was a smart move.
takes the navigation on the command ship of the Sith fleet.
Which was not a smart move.
And then the
There's only 2 antennae in the entire universe, by the way, just so you know.
And then the Orbaks land on the command ship. The Orbaks are the horsies, by the way.
They're not like son of father.
Well, they're related. According to the visual dictionary, they're related.
You have that sitting right there, don't you?
But we spend time with the antenna, and then the antenna becomes irrelevant. Now we're after the command ship. But what's the difference? Why not have the fleet deploying in the atmosphere? Why do we waste time with things like the dagger and the antenna?
We needed the lightning from Emperor Palpatine. That's what we needed, and we can't do that in space.
There's so many different ways that you could have achieved a similar result that don't feel contrived, forced, or otherwise just incoherent. Exegol being this place that the only way you can get there is the Wayfinder, yet we have 1,000 Star Destroyers with 5,000 or 50,000 or however many crew on each Star Destroyer. How do we service this fleet that's buried under the crust of Exegol? And the million Sith guys in their black robes running around tending to Palpatine's tanks. And the fact that you would tie 1,000 Star Destroyers together to one antenna, whether it be on a command ship or on the surface, to get it out of the cloud or whatever, when the Emperor is so powerful that he can use his own lightning to destroy 1,000 rebel ships at once, including killing my beloved Nine Nub, okay?
That's what it all comes down to.
How can he not use the Force to just help all those ships get out of the cloud? There's so many other devices that are sitting there in front of us as an audience, so where if we actually sit down and think about it for a minute, none of these MacGuffins even make sense. I'm sorry.
What part of this movie did you like, Sean?
The fact that it ended.
Man.
Ouch.
Babu Frick.
Okay,
I'm telling you right now, Babu Frick is the best character in the sequel trilogy.
Did you like Exegol? There's been these discussions of Sith homeworlds, and we saw a little bit of it in Rebels and the Clone Wars. Did you like that set? Did you like that environment?
So I'm gonna say this.
There's two things.
These Star Wars films that we have gotten over the last 5 years have all been very visually compelling. I will not knock the production people, the artists, the designers. The planets have been great. I know that there's been some complaints like, why do they always go to the desert planet and all that stuff. But no, I thought Exegol was gorgeous. I thought that the design of the Sith, Sith-inspired things, the throne. I thought the throne was cool. There's a lot to be praised in this movie. It looked great. But yes, there are things that I did enjoy the film. I do love the costume design, and I love the ships, and I love the planets, and all that stuff is great. And I like the Final Order, the little changes that they made to the First Order uniforms and whatnot. The visual cues that say this is something different but similar. It's subtle, but it's good. I liked all of it. The visuals, there's nothing to complain about.
The Mustafar scene could have used a lot more stuff. I mean, I would have loved to have seen Vader's castle. That would have been a great callback.
Well, it would have been very nice if they had included that, because then we would have known it was Mustafar.
Well, I mean, yeah, in Rogue One, they actually put
exactly.
Put the planets.
Exactly. If you're showing the Eiffel Tower, you don't have to put a thing at the bottom that says Paris. But if you're showing a back alley behind, Notre Dame, then you probably should put Paris, right? So your fan or your audience knows what's going on. This movie could have used that, but it would have been out of place as a saga film, and so they can't. So we need other visual cues, and like you say, David, it would have been fantastic to see Vader's castle in the background, because then we would have known, okay, this is Mustafar, and Kylo Ren's there, and he's doing some business. I think that would have given more, even more emotional weight to that scene where he's butchering all those dudes. Like, I'm here, I'm there, I'm going to my grandfather's house or whatever to find. Like, that would have been way cooler. Like, I think it probably would have tied it in a lot better to the original trilogy. But
like my parents, there's no way my parents would have known that was Mustafar.
I didn't even know it was Mustafar. Okay? All I know is Kylo Ren is butchering dudes in funny hats. And I'm like, this is cool, man. Kill the dudes in the funny hats. But I didn't know it was happening anywhere of significance. All I know is that from the crawl, and this is why the crawl is important, ladies and gentlemen, is that he is raging across the galaxy. And I'm like, yes, that is Kylo Ren raging right there in front of me, killing men in funny hats. But I didn't know where it was happening. And none of us knew where it was happening. Half the reason why we know what's going on in this film is because Jeff is reading out of the visual dictionary to us. Okay? Which goes to my point, right? Which goes to my point earlier about my frustration and my, general distaste for this process that Disney Star Wars has been going through. Where if you want to have a truly rich and layered experience in Star Wars, you have to spend like $500 on a bunch of stuff, including 4 tickets to the movie, in order to really get what's going on. And while I appreciate Jeff giving us the liner notes out of the visual dictionary, it's unfortunate that we have to have the liner notes out of the visual dictionary.
I'm here for you guys.
I appreciate you, Jeff.
When the montage began, I thought, oh my goodness, Kylo Ren just killed Constable Zuvio.
Oh yeah, he totally looks like Constable Zuvio.
They all do. Maybe those are all the peg warmers.
I was going to say we can all get those peg warmers now.
Totally.
Just up the price.
Which, it's funny, Jeff, that you bring that up, because when JJ was announced to be the director/writer of the final installment, we had joked within the group, we had joked about how JJ is going to bring back Zuvio so he can finally, make good on all those figures. And yeah, for a split second when he was going to town, I was like, oh, yes. But then it turned out not to be Zuvio. So
we were introduced to great advances in force powers in The Last Jedi, and they continued and were magnified in this film. One of them is the Force dyad between Rey and Kylo. Building on The Last Jedi across the 2 films, how do you guys feel about the advancement of those Force powers and that bond, that link, portal, what have you?
I kind of liked it. I felt that part really helped The Last Jedi. It really helped include the story, at least the balance part, because now everybody resides in one. It allowed for all 3 movies to kind of blend together and then have a conclusion.
I guess I kind of like the idea of the dyad. I don't know.
It's something new.
It is. If I look back on it, and if I'm honest, it's like the Force as presented in the original trilogy. We got incremental force powers that were new for each film, right? We went from, the mind trick to actual levitation and moving of objects and force ghosts. We went from Ben Kenobi's voice from beyond to actual force ghosts. And then we went into, in Return of the Jedi, we got the lightning, and we got, all that kind of stuff. And we got to see the progression of Luke from a novice Force user to, a more experienced Force user. And so the powers became stronger, more, more precise, more, whatever. So I understand that when we go into the sequel trilogy, that we're also supposed to be introducing new force powers, and things can, be added, and that's fine. But I think the problem with the sequel trilogy is that the force powers that were introduced were all absurdly over the top, completely out of sync with what had come before, and that they were given to people who had little or no training, and who just showed up and their force powers were already at 11. So while the dyad could have been an interesting idea, and it could have been something that was referenced or explored or, talked about conversationally amongst the characters, and then started to manifest itself as a power amongst these two people over the course of the trilogy, we just got two really overly powerful people, and then we're like, oh, well, the reason why they're overly powerful is because they're a dyad. And it's kind of, it feels like a lot of retconning going on. And like David said, well, it explains the last movie and explains the movie before that. Well, yes, very conveniently and almost apologetically, it explains what has happened in the last two movies. I would have accepted the Force dyad. I would have accepted Snoke's explanation of, the light rises, or the darkness rises and the light rises to meet it. I would have accepted all of that. Being able to have a lightsaber fight in two different quadrants of the galaxy and then spill things on each other and to hands. It's just, it felt like a superhero movie or some other weird sci-fi thing. It just didn't feel Star Wars to me. It didn't feel in line with what we've come to accept as Jedi and Sith powers.
With every Jedi that dies, so I've been thinking, okay, so we start off with this big pie. Okay, every Jedi has a little bit of this pie. As each one dies, some of that power goes to another individual.
Force pie.
Yeah, force pie. So then, as all the Jedi are taken down, they all then resonate into one, which would be Rey. And then, they say all the Jedi are within you. So she's got all this pie, and now is able
Force
to.
pie.
And now she's able to use it. So
what you're saying is that this is basically Highlander. All the Force users are in one Force user.
correct.
It's not that she's going out and killing them and absorbing their power, but like you say, as they die and as they become part of the living Force or the eternal Force or the not so whatever Force, they all become part of Rey. Like I can see that as a concept. I don't know if I entirely like it, especially since it means that Ahsoka Tano is dead.
Was it a literal transfer of power, or was it?
Well, you're thinking about with the Emperor. He was basically saying the same thing to her. Like, hey, you strike me down, you'll then become, you take all my power, and then you become the ultimate, Sith.
The one thing I will say is consistent with all of the trilogies is that the Lightsiders, the Jedi or whatever that were speaking in her head, all they did was give her encouragement. Because remember, Ben Kenobi says, if you go on this path, I can't help you. I can't influence events. I can't rescue you. I can't do anything. And that is almost consistent with that sentiment, is that, yeah, they come and they talk to her, and they say, come on, Rey, you can do it. We're all here behind you. Go, Rey, you're the bestest ever.
Team Rey.
Right? Yeah, Team Rey. Way! It's like, but they don't actually do anything. They don't call down the thunder on Palpatine. They don't do anything,
Well, either do the Sith, though.
Well, I know, but I'm just saying, they don't physically do anything. So, the fact is, if they don't help her, and the Sith don't help Palpatine, then is all of that power actually residing in them? Is Palpatine, crazy because all the Sith are telling him to do all these bad things, and is Rey just so awesome and collegial because, Ben Kenobi's in the back of her mind going, "Hello there." Like I don't know. Like, but it doesn't. Yes, they may be residing in their consciousness, but they're not really doing anything at this point. Yet, in the last movie we were told that Force ghosts can impact the physical world, and then by calling down lightning. And then we're also told in this film that not only can they call down lightning, but they can actually physically interact with objects, because Luke Skywalker catches the lightsaber and he lifts up his own X-Wing out of the ocean as a Force ghost. So if all the Force ghosts reside in Rey, why can't she just like nuke Exegol or the fleet or any of that stuff? Like, I don't get it. Like, we're given
Good question.
rules.
Why didn't she?
Right, well, we're given rules, right? We're given rules in the universe. And this is the thing. This is, something that's been said about fiction and fantasy writing and filmmaking for a long time, is the fans will accept whatever explanation you give initially for how your universe works. If dogs are ruling the universe and they speak English, that's great. But the dogs always have to rule the universe and speak English in all future iterations of this particular universe.
Multiverse.
Multiverse. Damn you and your multiverse, okay? Now, if we want to be consistent with the Force and say either Force ghosts can't influence the physical world or they can, it doesn't matter what you start off with, but you have to carry that all the way through. And then we ruin that in The Last Jedi, and then they double down on it in The Rise of Skywalker. And then they say, oh, but forget the fact that we did that over the last two movies. Now that it's down to the most pivotal battle between good and evil, Rey and Palpatine, that's all off the table now, and you got to do it yourself. It's inconsistent, and it's maddening.
Jeff,
Up until The Last Jedi, I wondered about the actual material, physical existence of Force ghosts. Because to that point, they could have been visions. They could have been devices to show the audience that this person is connected with the Force and is channeling those spirits or experiencing those spirits in some way. But then The Last Jedi makes the Force ghosts very much real, and they can interact with the physical world, and that's a game changer. And then that brings us to the end of this film where, is it really all the Sith versus all the Jedi? And I'm sure you've read or seen a lot of the material saying that there was filming that took place with Hayden Christensen and so on and so forth, and that the plan was to actually have the Force ghosts there, forming a barrier around Rey, protecting her, energizing her. So, would that...
Talk about fanfare, man. That would have been sweet.
I think it would have been. I think it would have been awesome. I think it also. Say what you want about the Force powers to 11 in the sequel trilogy, it would have been at least consistent with what they had been trying to do in the previous film, and what had come earlier in the movie. With the actual picking up or catching of the lightsaber. Like, now we're at a point where we can actually intervene in the physical world. I always accepted like Obi-Wan Kenobi's Force Ghost as that's Obi-Wan Kenobi, right? And he's reaching out from beyond, and he's still himself and his Jedi Knight. He still has this wisdom and all this stuff, but he's now in this state of otherness where he can't physically do anything, which is why he kept saying, I can't help, I can only do what I've been doing so far, which is to come here and give you advice and talk to you or whatever. But now, like you say, in the new trilogy, we can do all these other things. And even if they hadn't shown up, David, if they hadn't shown up as a wall against Palpatine, but even if they had shown up as the encouraging voices that they were in the film, I would have loved to have seen the actual ghosts to go with the voices. Like you say, if Mace Windu, Qui-Gon Jinn, Obi-Wan Kenobi, Anakin Skywalker, Yoda, Ahsoka Tano, like if they had all shown up in some kind of visual form, say maybe surrounding her when she's down and encouraging her to get up and fight back, like that would have been bomb diggity. Like I would have been all about that. I'm fine with that.
Ezra Bridger?
Maybe not Ezra Bridger.
Still alive?
Wasn't in the voices. I honestly think that they put themselves in a corner with Ahsoka, and I know they've pulled back on it, but I think they made a mistake by putting her in if they were gonna basically bring her back now.
Right. Well, so she disappeared at the beginning of episode 4 with Sabine Wren to go look for Ezra. It's not inconceivable that it would have been natural causes.
We don't know where the space whales dropped him off, or if they dropped him off. For me, there's something about the Force powers in The Last Jedi and The Rise of Skywalker that just doesn't feel right. And I don't know if that makes me a purist, but I accepted changes in The Force Awakens. In the opening scene, Kylo freezes a blaster bolt. And I thought, that's really cool, and I can go with that.
Too science fiction-ish?
No, not at all.
Not for me. That was fine. Rey using a mind trick without training, that's a different story. But essentially, the Force powers that I saw in The Force Awakens seemed to fit with the earlier films. But then in The Last Jedi, we take this great leap, and in The Rise of Skywalker, to be honest, I just can't get past the transportation of the lightsaber, the Force delivery of the lightsaber. I don't, it's just, yeah. It's really hard to swallow.
Force Prime, right?
Yeah.
Next day delivery. In The Force Awakens, that whole scene where he freezes the blaster bolt, to me that it felt appropriate, and in that moment early on, he felt like a real villain. He felt like a real Sith Lord. Like, he was powerful. He was, brutal. He butchered an entire village. But the fact that he had that much command over the physical universe, we've seen Luke Skywalker move things, and we've seen him lift 3PO up and move him around, and he's pulled his lightsaber out of a snowbank, But here's a guy who can take that energy bolt coming out of a weapon and pause it. That was cool. And even his ability to get in the mind of people, like getting into Poe's head and trying to get into Rey's head or whatever, that to me felt also like a logical extension. None of that stuff felt bad. It was just when we got to The Last Jedi and the communicating between living Force people,
Force guy?
And the Force guy, but in a full conversation. Because even in the original trilogy, they're always talking about reaching out with your feelings, right? You reach out with your feelings, and you see these people, they kind of get into a meditative state, and they start to reach out, and then they brush up against another Force user, and it kind of pulls them back, and they're like, whoa, what the hell? And, and you get moments like at the end of Empire, right?
Yep. Leia and Luke talking to each other.
Leia and Luke, but it's not really talking to each other because
they were talking.
But the point is, Vader says Luke, he's reaching out, and Luke says Father, and then and then he's done with it. They can't really have a conversation. It's a feeling and a reaction. He senses Vader, he responds. Luke reaches out to Leia responds, but it's not. It goes back even to A New Hope, where Vader's wandering around the Death Star and he goes, "It's a presence I haven't felt." He's not having a conversation with Ben Kenobi, but he knows he's there. He can sense it, right? And it's the same thing. You have the sensing that gets verbalized in the saying of the name of the person that you sensed, but it's never like a conversation, and it's not like Luke says, "Hey, Dad, could you hand me my hand back? That'd be really great." That doesn't happen. You don't have that. But now suddenly we go into, The Last Jedi, and you can have full conversations with people, and this, and it's really funny. I mean, to take the Skype analogy to the full, to the full max. It's like I can see you, but I can't see your surroundings because, on Skype you can fuzz out your background. It's just too on the nose, and it just gets silly. And it gets beyond, the Force becomes less mystical and becomes more mechanical and practical, and I think that diminishes it as a concept.
Am I old and closed-minded, or that suspension of disbelief?
Well, I guess the big question for me is what's next? Is there more, or is this it? Are we going to continue? I mean, are they going to all of a sudden, is everybody going to have lightning bolts coming out of them? And for me, it's like, okay, we've gone this far. Let's just stop. This is all you can do.
It's okay to put limits on things. It's okay to say, the Force can do all of this and no more. It's already a pretty powerful and impressive thing, in the context of this universe and what you can do with it. And
are they going to start teleporting themselves?
Well, yeah, but that's the next thing. Yeah, exactly. That's the next thing. Like, you might as well just, I'll just go. I just need to go to this planet, so I'll just force myself there. It just becomes so.
Luke kind of did.
No, he projected an image of himself. He didn't actually go there.
True.
Yeah. Just like Leia projected an image of herself, and it killed her too. Now that's Force consistency in the new universe, right?
Mm-hmm.
True.
Yeah.
Now, Luke was a more powerful Jedi than Leia, and his entire projection and all that included a battle per se and a bunch of other things. So you can see why it would kill him. Her being an untrained Jedi, just to reach out and do what she did with Ben Solo or Kylo Ren or whatever he is this week, killing her, especially after having been blown out an airlock and Mary Poppinsing herself back onto a ship. I will say that it was nice to see her walking around with a cane in the movie and being consistent with her injuries from the previous film, even though it's supposed to be 4 years later. So did that work? Yeah.
I thought it was only supposed to be 1 year.
Yeah, it's 1 year.
Oh, it is? I had heard between 3 and 5. So.
Yeah.
John, you know
a broken clock is right twice a day, David.
It's my
saying.
one time.
Uh-huh.
So Rey crosses the twin.
It's just nice to know how you feel all the time, Sean.
What?
Rey crosses the twins' lightsabers. She turns back Palpatine's Force lightning.
Right.
She destroys him. The effort kills her, and Ben Solo saves the day. He uses the last of his energy, transfers it to Rey, and then we have the kiss.
Mm.
The
Twilight
kiss.
fans everywhere rejoice.
The culmination of Reylo.
Yes.
My question with this kiss, is this technically a marriage as they join each other? I know that she said that her name is Rey Skywalker at the end. Was that basically a marriage kiss, and they are now joined together? But my one big disappointment with not only her taking the name and the kiss is that he was not one of the Force ghosts at the end. I thought that was kind of lame. If she's going to take his name, and also since he sacrificed himself at the end and he disappeared, he should technically be a Force ghost at the end. And honestly, I don't think it should have been Carrie Fisher. I think it should have been, Ben and maybe even just Ben and Luke, or just Ben.
That's an interesting take on the marriage. And
that's the first time I've heard that,
yeah. Yeah. And a great point about Ben as a Force ghost. There's precedent. Anakin appears almost immediately after his death on the second Death Star. So yeah, definitely that could have worked.
I was expecting a payoff on that as well, simply because they went through the whole process of making him disappear like his namesake, Obi-Wan Kenobi. I think they didn't do it because there's some moments in this movie that really feel like a full-blown ripoff of Return of the Jedi. And I think to avoid being called out for that, I think they left Ben out of that final scene simply because everybody would have been like, "Oh, come on! You remade the New Hope, and now you're remaking Return of the Jedi." Like I can totally see JJ in a room somewhere thinking about that. It's an interesting point you make, David, about the union between Rey and Ben, and whether or not her taking the name is not even a marriage or whatever, but like some kind of tribute to him and his sacrifice, or whether or not she's honoring Luke.
She always mentions quite often, I would have taken Ben's hand, not Kylo's.
Only in this movie, but yeah.
So that's where I kind of gather that impression.
Well, and it definitely feels that she has a stronger relationship with Ben than she has with Luke or Leia.
Which is interesting because if you look at the relationships as portrayed in the film, or in the films, the sequel trilogy, Rey and Leia do have a relationship. Mm-hmm. Leia hugs Rey before she even talks to Chewbacca after, Han Solo dies in mm-hmm. Force Awakens. And then she spends a lot of time training her. We were going out of the way to establish a relationship between these two characters. And maybe that taking the Skywalker name is an homage to Leia. I don't know, but she's a Solo now, so it's all very confusing. She didn't earn her Force powers. Then she suddenly decides that when she does finally get her, her parentage and her lineage, she doesn't like it, so she eschews it, assumes the name of Skywalker, and then squats at his farm at the end. I'm just like, but maybe it is love. Maybe it is marriage. So I'd like David's positive take on this.
Hey, that's what I'm here for. One other thing I do want to bring up is, now looking at the whole 9-episode series, I kind of see it more as a Palpatine series and not as a Skywalker series. It starts off with Palpatine, you've got this guy that's rising through the ranks, he becomes the dictator, and then at the end, it's his granddaughter that he's trying to,
right.
bring to the forefront. So,
right.
Personally, I am struggling with keeping it with the Skywalker and more of the Palpatine story.
It helps explain away the appearance of Palpatine in the movie. And trust me, I'm a big fan of Palpatine. As a character, he's up there. He's in my top 5. They killed him so many times, so I'm cool with that. Palpatine and Snoke and Palpatine, right? It's
what a waste.
Everything, yeah. It's just Robert Zachary. His short answer to the Rise of Skywalker was missed opportunities. We had JJ, for better or for worse, in the new trilogy, set up a villain, and then Rian Johnson just go and completely destroy that villain and maltreat. I mean, it's hard to say that about an evil leader of the First Order, but he was treated poorly in The Last Jedi. The character was unceremoniously ended early. We still have no explanation other than he was in a jar on Palpatine's desk. We don't have any explanation of who he was. And again, it goes back to the missed opportunity situation. We have all these characters that are so cool. Like, I thought Snoke looked awesome. I thought that Andy Serkis did an amazing job of bringing Snoke to life. But we got nothing out of that. There's comments thrown out by Leia, oh, he was around back in the days of the early Empire or whatever. You're like, okay, cool. Well, who was he? Was he the Imperial dignitary? Was he that overpriced action figure? Who was he? And what was his role? And where was he in the background? Was he out in the outer regions? Was he on Coruscant? Was he a failed apprentice of Palpatine? We don't know and we'll never know. But then they just said, oh, well, forget about the gold robe. It was actually Palpatine all along. I don't know if I can fully endorse the theory that this is Palpatine's cycle, because he was brought in as a stopgap measure to make up for Rian Johnson's failure.
Yeah, I wonder if, in hindsight, JJ would have used him throughout. It does feel like the Palpatine story to me. Contemplating the last scene where Rey takes the name of Skywalker, and the fact that we see her parents, but not really, and how did Palpatine have a child, and why did the child turn on him? I mean, all these questions. I'm trying to remember or remind myself that in the original trilogy, we really didn't have any backstory on the Emperor. The Emperor ran the Empire, and he was more powerful than Darth Vader. He was Darth Vader's boss, but we really didn't have his origin story. So I'm trying to look at it through that lens, but there are a few pieces that don't fit for me. And answer your question, David, yeah, I definitely, to me, it feels more like the Palpatine saga than the Skywalker saga.
Well, it does now. I mean, but at the end so if I had run into Supreme Leader Snow on the streets of Charleston after The Last Jedi came out, would you have said, this is by far the Palpatine saga?
No, I think it's Palpatine is kind of like the Great Oz with the curtain in front, and then all of a sudden at the end, that's boom, that's what we got.
After The Last Jedi, and to a certain extent, I'm still there, but I was in limbo. Had you asked me who does the saga belong to, I wouldn't have been able to give you an answer after The Last Jedi.
Well, no, that's also true, because by then we clearly understood that it's not the Skywalker saga anymore, even though that's what people kept calling it. You're like, yeah, there was a Skywalker in it. It only becomes Palpatine saga because of what we got in the last 15 minutes of this movie, when you think about it.
Well, I think we get it as soon as he says, "Hey, she's my granddaughter." That's when it was like, oh, well, this isn't the Skywalker saga anymore.
Part 1 for The Rise of Skywalker ended here. Perhaps I'll rework Part 2 in the future. Thank you for watching. Did the discussion spark memories, good or bad, of your experience with the film? Ultimately, what is your take? I find clear vindication when I revisit the sequel trilogy's grave. Yes, it was that bad. No, fans weren't the problem. Please consider a like and subscription for the channel.
Galactic Initiative is not authorized or endorsed by Lucasfilm Limited. The name Star Wars and all related materials are registered trademarks of Lucasfilm Limited, a subsidiary of the Walt Disney Company, all rights reserved. Galactic Initiative is a registered trademark, and other product and company names are trademarks of their respective holders. Use does not imply affiliation or endorsement.